So this is the Phantom simulator. This particular one started off life at Coningsby and was called M1, and I flew many simulator sorties in this particular aeroplane as such. It replicates exactly the cockpit, and it was kept up to date with the mission or the weapons standard as the aeroplane developed. All the systems in it worked, all the radar replication in it worked, so you could actually fly a full mission using the various bits of equipment, and it was computer controlled from a console outside the simulator. The only thing that this didn't have was motion. It was fixed to a ramp. It wobbled around a little bit, but not much, and it didn't have visuals. So basically you flew the sortie as if you were flying in cloud. So it was a limitation on that side. But everything else worked normally. All the undercarriage, the hooks, everything, the telelight panels. So all the emergencies would come up as they would for real in an aeroplane. And the instructors on the console would work you through all the various scenarios of what to do and, most importantly, what not to do in order to rectify failures on the aeroplane. That's the front cockpit. Likewise, in the back cockpit, everything worked exactly as it would do in the real aeroplane. The radar was replicated exactly the same. All the chaff and flare systems, down to the actual pins. So you would strap in, you would wear all the equipment, helmet on, and fly a mission as if you were actually flying it for real. Yeah, everything, once the simulator started, as the engines were fired up, everything would start to work. As the simulator rolled down the runway, all the speeds would come on. So exactly as you would see in the real aeroplane. Starting from the front, this is the radome, and in here is the radar scanner. Scanner is a huge, great disc, probably the size of the radome in diameter, and obviously it wagged left and right. The nav's hand control in the back operated it up and down, so the navigator could point the scanner where he wanted. And it's the radar scanner that would send out the radar beam that would be detected and displayed, and the radar displays in the back cockpit. Also in there was the continuous wave radar, and the Sparrow missiles, and we'll look at the launches in a second, they guided on a radar beam which was also sent out by the main radar, and by locking the target to locking the radar to the target, the continuous wave radar would be pointed at the target, and the Sparrow would see it and guide on that signal. So that's in there. Moving around, obviously the cockpits, and this is just a cockpit, XV490, although I did fly this airplane on 56 Squadron a good few years ago. Underneath here, you will see the area where the Sparrow missiles would have sat. And these are called semi-conformal launchers, and you can see the slots that the missile fins would have gone up into. There in the middle, one at the back. And then these things here are the rams, and these huge great things would push the missile down, initially about 4 feet into the airflow, at which stage a lanyard would pull out, and only when that lanyard pulled out would the missile motor fire. And these things actually literally pushed the missile away. And that was so that if you were in negative G or you were maneuvering hard, that the missile would have an impetus to get out of the airflow, the smooth airflow under the underside of the aircraft. The aircraft spoke to the missile through this little thing here, little dielectric panel, and it primed the missile with all the pre-launch commands from the radar, so that the missile knew where to look for the target once it came out into the airflow and rushed away. Quite a missile firing is one of the most dramatic things you would ever do in the cockpit. And basically this thing is like an express train when it goes off. It pushes into the airflow, the lanyard pulls out, the motor fires, and there's a huge great cloud of smoke and steam as it disappears, and it then accelerates to Mach 2.8 in front of the aeroplane in a very dramatic fashion. So yeah, huge great housing under the aeroplane. Obviously if this was a complete aeroplane, there were 2 forward and there were 2 at the back of the airframe as well. So it carried 4 missiles under the fuselage here. Obviously no wings on this one, but the Sidewinder missiles would have been on the wing pylons under the bottom of the wings on the Phantom. Coming back out, these are called the ramps, and these were for supersonic flight. And the idea was, this is the engine intake, and the engines would have been mounted well down behind where the aeroplane now stops. and these things moved out into the airflow, and the idea was this slowed the airflow into the engine down to subsonic speeds. What you don't want is supersonic air hitting the front of a jet engine, because that would cause damage and the engine would have trouble. So these things controlled the flow of the air into the engine. Not much around the back end. Obviously, looking up at the cockpits, single cockpits for each crewman. A lot different in the Tornado because it was a single one-piece canopy that generally the pilot controlled. If you look from the front, it was armoured glass at the front through the front windscreen, tinted slightly so that the pilot wasn't dazzled when he was looking through the gun sight. Canopies operated by a selector under the left-hand cockpit coaming here on the left-hand side there. Individually operated, but generally speaking, the guy in the back would close his first before the guy in the front, just in case the front cockpit had any problem and came off. You didn't want a cockpit in your lap when the cockpit was cycling. And you see on the back cockpit there, two things to point out. There's a big mirror on the outside of the rear canopy there, and that gave you much better view down over the back of the airplane into the 6 o'clock, so that you could check the 6 when you were in air combat. And this thing on the side here, the outside of the left-hand window there, is called the TESS. This is the telescopic sighting system, and this was a system to magnify visually a target that was locked up on the radar. You could peer through that telescope and you could actually see the target before you could see it visually, magnified through that sighting system. Originally adapted from a tank sight, and but fitted in the back cockpit, and the navigator would peer through the little eyepiece and be able to identify the target. This set's a little bit crispy, but we used to have a thing called flight reference cards that we would use in the cockpit, and as you can see, normal drills, and for example the yellow bit here, takeoff drills. So before you can get airborne in a Phantom, you have already gone through all those to wind it up and get it started. As you taxi out to the runway, you'd run through the takeoff checks. Navigator would read them out, the pilot would do the checks, and you can see challenge and response, runway checks, and you would run through all these checks at various times during the sortie. Lots of good information in here, such as limitations, tanking checks, the whole 9 yards, some performance figures, so all the stuff that you would need. But we would also carry another set of drills for failures. So these are called the emergency flip cards, and what we would do here was, with a particular emergency, we'd go to the relevant page in the flip cards, run through the drill, and between the pilot and the navigator we'd work out how to solve the emergency and recover the aircraft safely to land. And these are the emergency procedures there.